Meaningless. Meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. These are the first words that are spoken in the book of Ecclesiastes. This is where we're first introduced to the Hebrew word hevel, or hebel, which in this case means meaningless. I was drawn to talk about hevel after the week we spent discussing and reading Ecclesiastes. I'd heard about its various meanings, and I figured that it would be worth studying because it really changes your perspective on the entire book. The full meaning of hevel, however, goes much deeper than simply meaningless. There are several translations, and today I will go over those. The first and most common translation of hevel is breath, breeze, or vapor. This is the most literal translation. It comes from the Aramaic language. This form of the word is found in several passages throughout the Bible, such as Isaiah 57:13, where Isaiah writes about idols. He says, "The wind, or ruach, will carry all of them off. A mere breath, hevel, will blow them away." Now, when Solomon writes that all life is meaningless, he refers to the idea that life is futile, meaningless, a wisp of smoke, a vapor that vanishes, merely chasing the wind. What Solomon writes here means that without God, all life is vapor and merely comes and goes. Throughout the book, he elaborates on this, touching on how wisdom, work, pleasure, and lots of other things are all vapor, hevel. They just go away. This translation is strong in that it is literally defined as vapor, but when you translate it as a metaphor like Solomon uses it, it doesn't work. It would be like if someone translated the English slang cool as cold. Solomon here uses vapor as a metaphor instead of its literal meaning. The second translation of hevel is futile or fleeting. This makes much more literal sense when translated, allowing the passage to read out as life is futile. This translation still connects the breath aspect, but further emphasizes how fleeting that breath is. For example, in the Psalms, David writes that man is like a breath, hevel. His days are like a passing shadow. So the translation of the original passage using this form of the word would read out as futility, futility, all is futility, or fleetingness, fleetingness, all is fleeting. Another way this translation can be explained is through Solomon's prophetic message that the temple would be destroyed. There he shouted that everything was hevel, so he referred to the fleetingness of the temple that was built, using hevel as a way to emphasize its coming destruction. You can also use this form of the word to explain the name of Abel. Abel directly translates to hevel in Hebrew, and Abel's life was fleeting, it was short-lived, much like the breath he was named for. The third translation of the word is vanity, not in the sense of like narcissism, but rather worthlessness. With this translation, Solomon means that apart from God, we are simply flesh and bones, waiting for our destruction. We're worthless, everything is in vain. Solomon uses this word near the end of Proverbs, saying that grace is a lie and beauty is worthless, hevel. A woman who fears the Lord, she is to be praised. Many popular translations today use the vanity hevel in Ecclesiastes, most notably the King James Version. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity, etc., etc. Ultimately, with this translation, Solomon means that all the things of the world are worthless and in vain. The fourth and final translation of the word is beyond grasp or incomprehensible. Rather than everything being completely meaningless, there is meaning, but we just can't understand it. Just as the wind is impossible for us to grasp, we can't grasp the things that are hevel. They're beyond us. In Ecclesiastes 1:14, Solomon even writes that all the things that are done under the sun, all of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So, if we translate hevel as breath or vapor, Solomon presents a more vague picture of life. If we translate it as futile or fleeting, Solomon presents the passing of time and how it affects life. If we translate it as vanity or worthless, Solomon presents life as completely meaningless apart from God. If we translate it as incomprehensible, then Solomon tells us that life is beyond us and we must simply trust God. My final question for you is which translation you think works best? Which do you think Solomon intended to use? I personally think Solomon used a mixture of all the words, but the one that I like the best is the final one, beyond grasp. If we translate the original passage with this form of the word, we're given beyond grasp, all is beyond grasp. And I think that's ultimately the message of the book of Ecclesiastes, that we need to trust God's judgment and accept that which He has placed beyond us. The last words of the book of Ecclesiastes are, "For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil." And that is what I think really summarizes what Solomon is trying to say using the word hevel.